1 second. We're good? Okay, howdy everybody, my name is r0nk and I'm here to talk to you today about emergence. Woo! So, emergence occurs when I should talk in the mic. Is it picking it up?
Yeah, you can hold it.
Okay. So, emergence occurs when basically when a lot of stuff gets together and causes behavior that the constituent parts don't have on their own. And so, this is our current definition, and today, part of my talk, what I want to do is I want to come up with a better definition and kind of make more sense of it than just when things come together and do strange stuff. So, an example that you all have probably heard of before is Conway's Game of Life. I'm not going to go over all the rules because I bet half of you have probably written them before. But basically, when you have a cell that can interact with local nearby cells, according to these rules, what you end up with is interesting emergent behavior. So we all see the classic glider on the left. These are, on the left here, are also stationary life forms that will just keep going. And this system is complicated enough you can implement a full Turing machine, which you see there on the right. So in this talk, I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of emergence. We're going to look at those examples and come up with a model together, and then we're going to look at the implications of that model. So, part 1, examples. I want to ask you all a question. Does this look like an emergent process? Like, could you tell if this was generated by a random number generator or if it's some interesting physical phenomenon? Not really? Not really. All right. How about now? What do you think of that one? Maybe? A little bit more? A little bit more? Probably. A little bit of symmetry. This could be an emergent thing. All right. How about now? Definitely, right? So, not really? Probably not? A little more symmetry? Okay, now we're starting to see it. A lot of symmetry. Okay, now this is definitely an emergent process, and this, I mean, you can clearly guess what they are, but yeah, okay, this is definitely an emergent process. But when we're all the way back here, oh, we couldn't really tell. So that's a big thing. That's the first part of our model is symmetry tends to imply some sort of underlying order or some sort of underlying interesting pattern emerging. Here's another one. This is flocking. This is a bunch of birds, and you can definitely see that there's some sort of pattern emerging in spite of the fact that this is just a few basic animals all acting their own way. So, similar to Conway's Game of Life, you can come up with pretty good simulations of animal swarms just by these 3 basic rules. So here's another example. These are bees moving in such a way to try to distract predators. And this is another interesting thing where, if you look closely at it, it seems to be starting in one spot and then spreading out. And so,
but there's more than one starting spot.
Yes. So the interesting thing here is that there's a pattern and it seems to be spreading on its own. That's another interesting part that we want to use for our model. So this is the World of Warcraft Corrupted Blood incident. This is one of my favorite examples of emergence. So basically, there was a raid boss, and one of the raid boss's mechanics was to infect people with a plague, and if you were a high enough level, it did a little bit of damage. If you were low level, though, that damage could easily kill you. So the rule was, when you were leaving the dungeon, it would wipe this from you, so you wouldn't spread it around in the cities. However, it would not wipe it from your pets. So your pets would still be infected. You bring it back to a city, and then, as you can see in the corpses of the background, these are all bones of real players. It started spreading around cities, and so what was supposed to be, and what they predicted was going to be a localized effect, quickly grew out into a much bigger effect. So this is another example of a pattern growing on its own in an unexpected way. How many of you here have played Dwarf Fortress? Well, a couple people, all right. So Dwarf Fortress is legendary for emergent behavior. There are like thousands of forums filled with stories and stories and stories about emergent behavior coming from Dwarf Fortress. One of my favorite ones is the drunken cats, where the way the game was programmed, dwarves could spill alcohol on the ground, cats would walk through the alcohol. When cats cleaned themselves, they would get a full dose of alcohol, and so suddenly in the middle of a game, you suddenly have your entire base filled with drunken cats. And it didn't really make sense, but the connections of each individual pieces and small basic rules led to a much more interesting system. All right, metagames. I'm going to get it water real quick.
Oh, Lord.
Do you have some?
You want your boba?
If you get me one more, I will take as many shots as the audience wants. Like.
Drink!
Okay. All right, metagames. So if any of you have played competitive multiplayer games, you know that when they first come out, everyone's doing everything, nobody knows what's going on, and anything can work. The thing is that later on, games kind of, the strategy of a game kind of evolves over time, where then suddenly people learn that one specific tool is terrible, and so everyone stops using it. So when a game comes out, it's kind of an initial stage. After a while, it goes its own metagame, and then very far in later stages, everyone's using the same strategy, and the game's not fun anymore because everyone is now playing Fox on Smash Brothers. So, so that's the big thing we're taking away from this one is that Emergence has stages. So it starts off small and anything can. How much more is that? Is that the whole thing?
That's all of it.
All of it. All right. So. Oh my God, that's more. Okay.
Wait, do you want to chase it with this?
Is that Malort?
No.
Then no.
Gee.
No, I'm good. I think. Holy cow. Okay. Competitive games. So they basically have stages, and then usually they start off where anything can work. They grow into like their own little ecosystem, and by the end, everyone's deploying the same couple of strategies. That's the big thing we're taking from metagames. For my last example, it's the process of life. Usually, you can definitely consider life an emergent process. You start off with a few basic chemical reactions. If I was a biology major, I could explain the rest of it, and you end up with us at Freaknik. All right. So we're going to take all those pieces, and we're going to put them together into a model, and we're going to see what that model implies. So the first thing is the stages. So there's three basic stages. The first one is the startup stage. In biology, they call this a biogenesis, I think. I'm not, we'll help. But basically, that's the transition from random noise into something that can sustain itself into something that can replicate. So at this stage, it's a long time, it's very complicated, and it's a struggle to simply understand what's going on in a very local environment. The next stage is the Cambrian explosion stage, where basically, the Cambrian explosion is, sorry, let me get a drink of water real quick.
Lord.
I'm a Lord herd, man. Oh.
You're welcome.
Ah, it's my Lord.
All right, so the Cambrian explosion is basically way back when the organisms were first getting started, there was a Cambrian explosion where a bunch of life forms came out and merged all at once, basically. So this is the stage where you can replicate, and you have so much room around you to replicate in. So it's like an explosion. And mutations here are a lot easier to deal with because if you have a mutation, the environment is so empty that you probably won't get eaten by a predator or something like that. So another critical part about this part is that there's the dynamic between exploration and exploitation. And at this stage, it's exploration. That's the most valuable thing you could be doing. At the next stage, the monopoly stage, this is when basically you have replicated so much that there's nothing left to replace. And so at the monopoly stage, which is what I call the percolation point, where if in mathematical models, if you start off with $100 and you're like gambling and you have a 49% chance to win, I don't know, like $1 or something, or like $2, whatever, eventually you're going to run out of money. I don't think I did the math right there, but you all get what I'm saying, is that eventually there's some investments where you run out of money. However, there's some where if you have enough money, you'll just get infinite money because it's a good investment. So the percolation point is when it crosses over that threshold. There's a whole good math explainer series I can point you to, but the word percolation is what you want to Google. So this is the part where you basically snap to being a majority, and growth slows down because you're trying to replace things in the environment, but you are now the environment, so there's nothing left to replace but yourself. At this stage, which is the important thing, is that exploitation is more important than exploration. So if you keep exploring your environment, eventually you're just going to rediscover what other people have already discovered, so it makes less and less sense to keep exploring. If you just follow the traditional route at this stage, it's actually probably better for you because exploration tends to be expensive. So there's already a lot of work in this exploring emergence, and one of the big things is negative entropy. So if you listened to my talk last year, you know that entropy is basically like noise. It's the opposite of information. So it's the opposite of information that you have. So one of the big things life does is that it makes systems more ordered and less chaotic, at least temporarily. All right, so there's a really interesting paper that came out that links the process of abstraction and emergence together. I've got the link down at the bottom. You can probably get it from the paper. But basically, whenever the parts you have whenever your constituent parts are replaceable, that's a really heavy implication of emergence, because at a lower level, you could have multiple different architectures or whatever, but at the higher level, you'll have just one program. And so there's an interesting paper that tried to do a good mapping of emergence just based on when things can abstract. I'm waiting for get the picture. You good? Okay. Oh, did you need another one? I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is a picture from that paper, and you can see here. Does the mic travel? Am I gonna disconnect myself? Yes, I will. All right. I'm just gonna point and talk really loud. All right. So over here, you have the basic fundamental particles, basically. You have the fundamental particles over here. And then you can see the patterns that emerge from this as an emergence layer, and then this is their theoretical layer. But you can see that this is the baseline, this is the emergent part, and then this is their model of the emergent part. Yeah. All right, so in my opinion, the most critical insight throughout all of this is that patterns like this can impose themselves on a system. So at a starting point, the pattern becomes small, and then over time, the size increases. So that's basically the foundation of my model. It's actually pretty simple. You have an environment, which I'll call O, and that's basically, if you think of that just like computer memory. And then you can have a transformation, which is like a program that transformed the memory. This is like physics acting on reality. You have a creature, which is just a subset of your memory. And then your population is how much memory that creature is using, and then emergence is just when the size of your creature is expanding. That's all it's really saying, is just the derivative of the population is greater than or equal to 1. So I want to look at some implications of this model. So one of the interesting things from this book called Adaptive Markets is that if a strategy works, it becomes more popular. This is a book based on the stock market, and basically if you have a strategy to invest in one company and it makes money, you're going to invest more and more money in that company. And then if you have another strategy that straight up doesn't work, you're going to invest less and less money until you're not investing anything at all. And so one of the interesting ideas is that evolution now happens at higher levels of extraction. So where it used to happen at the cell level, it grew to the animal level. And now things are evolving not at the physical level, but at the ideological level. And so this is a really interesting idea from this book, is that one of the biggest reasons we've become so good at evolving as humans isn't because our bodies physically evolve very fast, it's because our ideas evolve very fast. And this is an important point, ideas as emergent life forms. So there's a lot of debate around the definition of a life form, but for my model, this works, where ideas replicate in limited space, so they're emergent behavior. And in the same way that cells work together to make a body, humans work together to create culture. I think this is one of the big differences in my interpretation, is that instead of humans being so much better because of our intelligence or whatever, really the only thing that makes us different is our ability to communicate and create a culture. So it's like we've created our own superorganism that's a culture rather than ourselves. So there's one more important point, is that the important ideas, the ones that impact us, the ones that have the most effect on our lives, are the evolutionary successful ones, not the good ones. So a lot of ideas don't need to be true or good or ethical or anything like that in order to have a huge impact on us. They just have to be easily shared and easily, they have to take up a lot of our headspace. So with that in mind, thinking about the hacker creature in our heads, the hacker idea, the hacker ideology, one of the big things is how do we, if you accept that rather than this being an innate part of ourselves, that this is a creature we have to take care of in our heads, then the question is, how do we take care of it when the Cambrian of explosion of the internet is over? The internet back in the day used to be a ton of different websites, and now we have 3 of them, all of which we just scroll on. So it's like, what's the word, carcinization, where every creature eventually becomes a crab. It's the same thing with websites now. Everything just eventually becomes a doom scroll. So I think one of the hard parts that I've seen in a lot of the hacker culture right now is trying to figure out how to take care of this creature, because other ideologies are kind of growing now, and it's a very tricky thing to take care of. let alone, spread to other people. So this is a big one. I don't know if any of you are computer science majors, but this is big O notation. And what this basically says is that you can organize algorithms based on how quickly they grow in space in one dimension or another. But the important thing here is that even if you have ideology that's good for right now, if it can eventually be replaced, it will be replaced. So there's a few constituent parts of the ideology that it's important to understand. And over time, certain ideologies can take over other ideologies. So replacement is kind of like the fundamental currency of my model. Like, this is the basic thing that different creatures have and different creatures have to take care of. So, I mean, we can see this all throughout pop culture, where the bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy. It's things grow because they can grow. And another big important part of this is that things that don't care about being replaced will eventually be replaced. Like, if you have people who only care about exploration and not power replication, then eventually they're going to be replaced by people who only care about it. And yeah, an environment with scarce resources, there's a minimum level of energy you need to have in order to not be replaced. And freedom is the energy and surplus of this. And this is kind of intuitive, and just if you think of this in terms of money. Like, you need a certain amount of money to survive, and then the money you have beyond that, you kind of have a choice with. But at a base level, you need to survive in order to even have money. And the thing is that the way things evolve is that this level of money rises over time. I mean, if you look at rent prices and everything else, you can kind of get an intuitive sense of this, that because strategies evolve over time, your freedom kind of goes down over time, because as you see the bad options, if you keep going down and keep picking the bad options, eventually you can't pick any options at all anymore. So Johnny Silverhand was right. There's a quote here that's really good. It's, this is a people's war against a system that's spiraled out of control. It's a war against the forces of entropy, understand? And this is where we're at as hackers, I think, and currently, is trying to figure out how to deal with enshittification. Because, we like to think that this is just a couple of people who are just rude and unethical, but this is kind of the natural end stage of an emerging process. You have the choices of the internet have all kind of converged into one simple thing, and this is not necessarily an option of the powerful corporations. This is just the natural end result of every other corporation being replaced. So there's another interesting thing here, is that I'm supposed to put this. So I think the big thing I'm trying to say is that, like, a lot of the problems we're dealing with isn't necessarily ethical dilemmas, it's systematic consequences. So a good example of this is why it's rude to suck at World of Warcraft. This is a great video and it explains what's happened in World of Warcraft. So basically, in World of Warcraft, when it first came out, there was a bunch of people, it was a Cambrian explosion, and they could all do whatever they wanted. They would do interesting things, like they would start stores, they would role play, they would do all these things. And eventually, over time, it became more elitist. It became more, oh, we have to get the best loot, we have to make our numbers go up. And then eventually, the people who like to explore left. And it was just the explorers. It was just the people who wanted more and more and more. And so what happened is, eventually people were like, man, wouldn't it be great if we could go back to launch day? When everyone wanted to explore, when everyone wanted to do things? And so they did. They released World Classic. And the thing is that all the people who went, they brought the bug back with them. They brought the same elitist thing. And so they went back to the old game, but the world had changed at that point, because the actual physical reality they were dealing with wasn't the problem, it was their ideological reality. And they brought that back with them. And so this is a really interesting video that explains what happens. And so it's like, even if we go back to the old internet, we all know that scrolling is what it's going to devolve down into. So this is a really interesting video. This is a great explanation, and it's by Folding Ideas. There's another famous thought about experiment called Rocco's Basilisk, and basically the idea is you have to build the scary death AI, or the death AI will torture you. I don't think it necessarily works until you replace the fear component with a replacement component. And then it's very scary, and this is the kind of thing we can all feel already, where it's like, we feel like we're building this machine that's not built for us, which is a bizarre feeling, but I think we all kind of feel it. And so I think in order to deal with this problem, we basically have two options, and that is to stay in a Cambrian explosion for as long as we possibly can for infinite growth, which is questionable if that's even possible. The other option is impaired evolution, where the only other option you have is to basically prevent the monopoly stage by preventing, the same way governments try to deal with real monopolies, is prevent anything from becoming too powerful and kind of build your own false diversity just because you're keeping in walls to prevent one organism from growing and taking over everything. So this is kind of a weird thing because I don't think either of these are good options. Like infinite growth, which is physically impossible, or just agreeing to try to fight the process of evolution as hard as you can. So there's a quote that I want to leave you with, and that is that this was a book called Earthlings, and it's a really interesting story. I'll do the sin of reading from my own slides and say that everyone believed in the factory. Everyone was brainwashed by the factory and did what they were told. Anyone who remained unbrainwashed had to keep up an act in order to avoid being eliminated by the factory. This really was an interesting one. Earthlings by Sakya Murata. Did I say that right, Sam? No, I did not. Okay. All right. That's my last slide. I'm available for questions.
Wouldn't there be a third option of actually evolving with the system and making ourselves work with the new systems that's coming rather than try and avoid it or just throw our hands up and say it's over?
Okay. So the question was, and let me know if I get this right, is wouldn't it be better to just evolve and grow with the system as it evolves and changes, right?
Yeah.
That's assuming we're in a Cambrian explosion. So that's the one we're currently in. So if we're in a monopoly, then like the amount of freedom you have, the amount of options you have is getting increasingly low. So it's not a question of evolving anymore. It's just a question of conforming. If that makes sense. I'll talk to you more after this show, but I think that's the fundamental thing. I think there was one more question over here. Was there? Okay. All right.
So I'm trying to think. It seems, but I could be wrong, that like the process you're talking about, ideologies taking, you can actually have the same thing happening with multiple ideologies at the same time. That's just like my crappy mental model of it right now. Do you have any insight as to how you can model how the different ideologies as they flux, interact with each other? And so I'm thinking of something like, we have AI trending and we have whatever's happening with that, but we also have the continuation of the normal capitalist system, right? And so those two things are intertwined, but they seem, at least to me, like they're kind of separate ideologies, and while they may play off of each other, they aren't the same thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Do you have any insight as to how can we model, how can we adapt to different ideologies that are evolving in parallel?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that was a complicated question, but basically, I'm trying to repeat it for the camera. But it was basically how do we model differing ideologies, right?
That are
at the same
happening at the same time.
They're all happening at the same time. I think this is kind of this is a topic for the humanities. This is what humanities is, It's just like the STEM major discovers humanities. Yeah, this is what it is at the end of the day. It's I think I think that's what anthropologists and different cultures do. I think this is definitely that's their wheelhouse. I think that's the whole world of what they do. I think that's the best way to do it. If you're looking for a mathematical model, I think it depends on I don't know, I'm not an anthropologist, but that's I think that's what they do. So
Have you read any Graeber? I think that's his name. I could be Graeber. Thank you.
Graeber?
Yeah.
I will.
Are you familiar? Yeah,
No.
check it out.
Yeah, okay, definitely, yeah. All right, any more questions? All right, thank you.